We have Tory Gray and Tyler Tafelsky here. Tory is the CEO and principal SEO consultant at the Gray Company. Tory Gray is a leader in the SEO space who brings a refreshing perspective and inspiring way of looking at things. Tory is a passionate mentor for WT SEO and offers vast experience in all things growth strategy. Tyler has roots as an SEO writer and strategist, and he now directs content strategy and copywriting at the Gray Company. Tyler thrives in both analytical and creative side of SEO, especially when it comes to leading content creation. The Gray Company is an adaptable group of senior SEO advisors with varied backgrounds in tech and content. The Gray Company provides strategic guidance and consulting across many verticals, including SaaS and tech startups, nonprofits, and regulated industries. The floor is all yours. Take it away.
Thanks for making us sound fancy.
Yeah, thanks, Bernard. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our ClearScope webinar today on elevating content to rise above the competition. I am your presenter, Tyler Tafelsky, and I'm here with Tory Gray.
Hello again.
And today we're going to be talking about 3 particular chapters. This first one is seeing the 10,000-foot view. It's a bit more reflective and introspective to get you looking at things a little bit differently. The second section is focused on identifying gaps, making updates, looking at some of the more foundational practices of honing your content strategy. And the last section, we dive into some more fun stuff around some of the specific techniques and strategies and some of the things that we see working today. Jumping into our first section on zooming out. So expectations versus reality. So much of the time with SEO, we spend really deep in the weeds, zeroed in on these very hyper-focused tasks. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day gains or drops. And it always seems like there's new competition coming in, whether it be new competitors or existing players all fighting for top visibility, and ultimately it can just kind of feel like a roller coaster ride and an uphill battle. So it's important to kind of curb that emotional roller coaster that is SEO and really zoom out and take just a wider look at your overall strategy and the timeline and just kind of the overall approach on what we're doing here.
Yeah, it is just way too easy to get really lost in the details of that day-to-day in admin, just fiddling with stuff like this little tweak to this little title tag and this little change here, and stuff that it's so appealing to feel busy, but the problem is you're probably not actually moving the needle when you're doing all of that fiddling. So we urge you to pull back and resist the urge to stay that busy and to pull up and see what needs to be seen.
All right, so this first step in zooming out is really just all about bringing clarity to some of the more internal and introspective things. So a few thought starters here would be, first and foremost, let's define and articulate what it is that we do and we do really well, keeping in mind our unique value proposition. The next step here, we want to get a really firm grasp on who it is we're talking to, what kind of tone do they use, how can we best resonate with our audience. And then we want to get an honest look at where we stand currently. We can look at this through a lot of different perspectives, but one common example is just like, if this is a new site with minimal domain authority, it's going to have a drastically different strategy and expectations compared to an age domain with high authority. So it's really important to kind of get real with that, as well as getting real with how good of a job we're doing. We can always pinpoint areas for improvement and growth, but we also want to play to our strong suits as well. And lastly, we want to take comprehensive inventory on all the things that we have at our disposal, be it our current content, tools, people, resources, all of these things that we have to work with and how we can best leverage those things. All right, now we get into a little more of a high-level overview of kind of the search landscape itself. Some of the questions that we want to ask in this regard are, who exactly are we up against? What sort of tactics are they using? More specifically, we might want to look at what's working really well for them. Conversely, where are they dropping the ball? It's also helpful to kind of get an understanding of the nature behind their content and where it stands in the customer funnel or sort of the user intent model. Like, are they producing more high-level thought leadership content, or are they getting more into the nitty-gritty details on different technical matters and things like that? And eventually we'll want to do a deeper dive and look more at some of the more conventional SEO processes like competitive link analysis, content analysis, EAT, and things of that nature. And ultimately we want to just get a really firm grasp on how they're executing and understanding exactly why they're winning in the search results. So this can kind of give us a gauge on the difficulty of the search landscape and ultimately whether or not it's going to be worth it. And if it is worth it, how long is it going to take to start to see some of those results? Yeah, so that's kind of the top level overview here. A couple other things too is just don't be afraid to do something different. It's really common in the SEO world for everyone to want to follow the leader and replicate what's working. But where we see a lot of the real growth opportunities are being original and doing what others are not doing.
Yeah. Competitive research is so critical to do, but I think it's so easy to fall into the trap of doing it in order to keep up or doing what they're doing instead of identifying where you can stand out and be better instead. Where are you going to go big? Where are you not? We want you to combine these two inputs, really understand, what are you doing today and what are you good at and what's the competitive landscape, and put together what is your unique point of view. We have a growing problem in content creation in SEO where content is going to be created at a bigger and bigger scale now that we have these AI generation tools. So really the question is, how can you stand out? Really truly ask yourself the hard questions about what unique value you and your brand are contributing through the content that you can create, and frame that from a perspective of what do you want to be known for. So it often goes back to your brand's unique value proposition of what are we great at, what do we want to be known for, where are we the thought leaders, and really honing in on specializing there versus just creating content to create content.
All right, yeah, and this kind of leads us into our next section around identifying gaps and updating content.
Meeting intent really is everything. There's so much that we can do to identify and try and meet user needs. Instead of focusing on a keyword and just trying to answer the keyword and what it explicitly states it's looking for, try and think about what users mean by the words that they say. So sometimes that intent is hidden or missing, and it can even be missing in what the other search results are showing today. So if you have a unique point of view, you're able to bring it to the table and understand how can you address that need that might not be getting met. But really reframe the question in terms of what's going to cut it for you to rank on page 1. I do hear people asking good questions about, maybe consider not making content if you're not going to be in position 1. And my personal perspective there is maybe that's too high a bar. But if you're not going to be on page 1, then I do think you're doing it wrong. There's certainly value you can add or a unique angle you can provide that makes sense in position 2 or 3 or 4, and that's good and real and valid, and you can and should bring that perspective to the table. So yeah, go for number 1, don't get me wrong, if that is going to be meaningful and that's where you really stand out, absolutely be gunning for those positions. But don't hesitate to make content as long as you feel like you're substantially better than, say, positions 5 through 10 as a rough estimate.
All right, now we're jumping into keyword mapping and content clustering. So this is a fairly common process in the greater SEO community that just ultimately helps keep our strategic direction organized, helps keep teams on the same page. And this exercise helps us visualize, how well we're aligning our content with both users and keywords. So the combination there is important. We can pinpoint gaps with this exercise, such as like where there might be a mismatch or misaligned intent. There are many shapes that this document or this kind of process can take. We actually offer a template that is a bit more thorough and includes specific fields around certain data points and indicators like target personas, who are we going after, what stage of the funnel are they in, and where we can target them or meet them there. Certain CTA pitches that we might want to incorporate on the page. And then we also add some links to associated resources or documents, in which case we use ClearScope quite often. So we'll oftentimes include our links to our ClearScope resources as well in that document. So all in all, this is just a great exercise to help sort of keep everything all under one roof. Identifying gaps on gaps on gaps. So this is probably one of my more favorite aspects of strategic SEO content. Identifying gaps for improvement and missed opportunities, and the possibilities there are almost limitless. But some of the initial places where we'd like to look are around assessing content, assessing our current keyword targeting and where we can build upon aspects of our content that might be a bit thin or lack substance for users, or maybe there's some obvious long tail gaps that we can capture with some subtle copy tweaks here and there. We might look a little bit more at performance gaps, like our keyword rankings. Where are we not ranking in the top 3, but we're still in the hunt on page 1, and how we can improve upon that. We also might look at competitors and where are they ranking, where we're not ranking, and how we can sort of bridge that gap. And then we might also look at direct things within the piece of content, like buried intent, poor or thin copy. Maybe there's visual gaps, like we could create a graphic or add more photography for a little extra engagement. Or maybe our EAT is a little weak and we need to bolster that. So there's really a lot of possibilities with gaps, and it's kind of a general term, but it's also kind of fun, and you can get really creative with it. So while we're on the topic of creativity, getting creative with keyword selection. So this is another big one where it's pretty common in the SEO community, of course, but for me personally, that's a photo of me. I'm a bit of a house and techno DJ on the side for fun. But I think that's kind of a good analogy with SEO and keyword selection, because like a DJ, you have to be very passionate about the tracks that you're selecting and choosing to play. And the same goes with SEO. You have to be really into it and really excited about the content that you're going to produce and what kind of themes that all hinges around. So some of the obvious places to look are like transparent indicators like search volume and keyword difficulty. But we also want to look at some of the more alternative and sort of hidden ways in which we can find good keywords to sort of hang our hat on. And with that, we might look at feedback from customers, talking to our customer service teams, different participants or even professionals or influencers who are in the space, where we might be able to get some insight. And also just kind of taking into consideration, just sort of sum it up, looking at the difficulty of some of these keywords on more of a competitive level, and knowing where we're at against them, and sort of where we stand authority wise, and how that fits into our content objectives and our keyword selection. So that's also kind of like the last piece of making sure we're choosing the right keywords and if they sort of make sense within a competitive framework. All right, another topic that I do love is around copy. And I genuinely believe that copy is a little bit underrated in SEO. And that's largely because for the longest time, we could get away with marginal copy and still see results. but those days are sort of long gone, and it all sort of circles back to engagement. You know, if our copy is weak, users are going to see right through that BS and bounce, and Google is going to recognize that behavior. So naturally, rule number one is prioritizing users and readability. Of course, you know, keyword placement and all that kind of technical stuff still serves a purpose, but it's mostly about balance, and oftentimes less is more. So really emphasize, you know, your organic vocabulary, sort of richness within the copy, using different semantics, dare I say, vibes that will resonate with your users. All that stuff really does matter. So, and with that too, in terms of sprucing up your copy, you know, use different tools. You know, we're genuine fans of ClearScope, especially when it comes to adding sort of that semantic richness. Yeah, it's a great tool.
We're also not kidding there, and we're not buttering up Renard. The Gray Company is an active subscriber to ClearScope. We do recommend it to clients. We use it for ourselves and our own content on our own blog. So we are actual true super fans. So thanks, Brian.
Yeah. And just a couple of other things to wrap up copy. Like fluffy content has really got to go. If you're like me and you learned SEO back in the day when keyword stuffing was a thing, you got to really kick those bad habits. I mean, I still sometimes catch myself trying to jam the keyword in the H2s and things like that. But yeah, really just prioritize usability. And also too, just think about like the structure of your content and how you can really tighten things up. One example I use is just, you know, if we're getting a ton of traffic from mobile, really take a close look at how your copy is showing up on a phone. And if you have some really lengthy paragraphs or some dense copy that might be sort of overwhelming your users, and try to break that up with either just shorter, punchier paragraphs or incorporating more visual media into the mix there. So, all right, addressing EAT. So expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. This is obviously a big topic that gets a lot of attention. We're not going to spend too much time on this slide because we do have a couple other specific slides that speak to aspects of EAT, but really just wanted to bring this to the forefront so we know, like, this is definitely oftentimes some low-hanging fruit for certain SEO applications and how we can sort of elevate our content. Chances are your top competitors are probably using aspects of incorporating experts and different forms of trust. So really this can help us empower our content with a little extra oomph. Internal linking. So this is another one that's widely discussed lately, and for good reason. Internal linking can really move the needle, especially for larger sites with strong authority, but it's still a fairly fundamental practice across pretty much any type of web content. A few go-to practices that we utilize with internal linking is, you know, identifying our top pages and where we can build internal links to and from. We might even try to dig up some old content or some older posts that were published years ago that may have been kind of forgotten about, but would be great candidates to build links from. And in that process, we might even find that some of this content has a lot of potential. And if we were to overhaul that content and rework it, it could become sort of a money page or kind of a new SEO asset for us. Also too, leveraging jump links shown kind of in the visuals here. These are also called anchor links, bookmark links. They have kind of a lot of names, but they all kind of do the same thing. It's ultimately jumping users to specific pieces of content within the same piece itself. The example here is a table of contents that we oftentimes put in long form pieces of content that might be pretty deep. And if users want to head to a specific section of their interest, this kind of helps with the usability behind that. But it can also help with just our organic presence. You know, oftentimes we can get those jump links to show up just below our meta description. So helps us occupy a little bit more real estate in the search results and just kind of show up a little better in terms of our visibility.
So now we're going to shift into showing you some examples
understanding hidden intent. So this is a topic that really doesn't get quite enough attention. Unlike sort of the more transparent forms of intent like raw keyword data or just some of the more fundamental stuff, hidden intent can point to search interest that's a little less on the surface. Again, we might want to look at talking to our customer service teams to inquire about specific pain points or certain questions that are coming up over and over again that maybe don't get a lot of search volume, but are sort of topics that we really want to talk about to reach our audience, or maybe kind of fill that gap with customer service and support and things like that. We might even zoom way out and look at the bigger picture behind search market data, and kind of understanding the total addressable market for a given topic. In this example here, Tory has written a very insightful post on multiple domain strategy, which is largely based on this concept.
Yep. So just to give you a little color on what's happening here. So this was a post that came about because 3 or 4 different clients were talking about it over the course of a few months. I got specific questions about like, oh, should we be consolidating this brand into this brand? Or we have the opportunity to buy this website and launch this, or buy this company. What should we do? How should we handle this? When I looked to, we would have these constructive conversations about this, but when I looked at what was actually showing up in search results, everyone was talking about how to do it. Structurally, how to set up and maintain multiple domains. Nobody was talking about why you'd want to do that and why you might not want to do that and what those scenarios might be to help you make the right decision for your business. So this is a choice example of, we had customer data come to us to tell us people are interested in this. And even though, domain strategy or multiple domain SEO strategy really only has 30 searches a month, it's not huge, but we know our customers are asking this question. And so we don't care. We are willing to take the time to hone in on what we think is the right and meaningful answer that's missing, that's that gap in search results today.
Yep. And of course you can use some of the more fundamental tools like Ahrefs, ClearScope, SEMrush to validate some data that might be of interest. There might not be a lot of search volume, such as the case with Tory's example. And lastly, Bernard kind of hit this nail on the head with a post he written on this topic about making sure that we're aligning the content type with that user experience that's going to best align with what they're interested in. So for instance, like Tory's example, it's a long form blog post that really speaks to that topic in depth, but maybe in another context, we might want to create more visual media or a video or talk about it on a podcast or things like that. So keep that in mind.
This is another kind of classic that is still working today, really starting conversations around thought leadership. I mean, obviously Sparkturo and Rand Fishkin have been masters of this forever. They're still doing it. They're still putting out great conversation starters. And what I think that they do really, really well that other people sort of don't give themselves permission to do too often is not really care about the search volume of the keywords. They're willing to start a conversation about something that they think is a meaningful topic, even if, according to all the tools out there, nobody's looking for it. More often than not, that you find that people are searching for that, and that there is a meaningful audience. Maybe they don't know it yet. Maybe they are looking for it and it just hasn't been caught by the tools, but there's meaningful stuff happening here. So the big takeaway is there's more to SEO than keywords. Focus on telling the story you want to tell that's actually useful to your target audience.
Leveraging the E and the A and EAT. All right, so this is kind of a fun one. It's very powerful in terms of elevating strategic SEO content. And it's especially useful in an editorial context where you have a lot of content that could be attributed to a qualified expert. It could be written by that expert or even just reviewed by that expert. And naturally, we think of these experts as sort of these high degree professionals like those with a doctorate or a medical professional or a lawyer. And that would be the case for your money or your life type of content, or YMYL. But that's not all there is to it. There can be slightly more casual instances where we could use expertise in non-YMYL situations, like dating advice or food and product reviews and things like that, where demonstrated or sort of everyday expertise can work really well. And we can really bring these components together by, obviously displaying the credentials of the given professional, like in the case of Chris Brennan in our screenshot there. He's obviously more of kind of that YMYL experts, but in the other example with this featured snippet showing up, this is obviously someone who's a little bit more of an everyday expert around woodchucks. So believe it or not, woodchucks can chuck 700 pounds of wood. Didn't know that till now, but yeah, so obviously, we want to call out their credentials and communicate to both users and Google that this is a qualified expert. And the best way to sort of do that is to have dedicated profile pages for our experts. And from there, we can showcase their contributions on the site, as well as link to their social profiles, their LinkedIn, whatever makes the most sense for the given industry or context. And crossing the T in EAT. So this is oftentimes some low-hanging fruit, and we can add a little bit more legitimacy and transparency and accuracy within our content. And I come across a lot of examples or just content in general where, they're stating specific facts or they're making certain statements, but they're not really backing it up with a reliable reference or some sort of cited source of where they're spewing that information. So that's kind of a common gap that can be bridged by incorporating a little bit more research. Maybe it's just adding a quality external link to the right reference, be it a PubMed study or just a helpful link to wherever that source of information is coming from. I'll even look for .edu sites that are speaking to this topic and seeing if they're knowledgeably talking about the information that we want to share, and maybe that could help back up our work. Also, too, we might even look at it from a local SEO angle, like things like citations or name, address, phone number, or map, and making sure that that information is easily findable. That could be in a footer or somewhere on the site that's just easily accessible. In addition to that, we might have checked all the boxes around site security, having a privacy policy page, terms and conditions page. Just having that all very transparent can really elevate trust pretty substantially. So, and while these are all sort of granular elements, really we want to think a little bit bigger picture around how we can position our website or our brand as a trustworthy authority in our niche. And that just really comes down to continuing to put out high quality content that really resonates, provides a lot of value, and that naturally sort of cultivates trustworthiness over time. So that's kind of the ultimate seal on the deal. Utilizing structured data. So this one is slightly more technical leaning, but certainly does factor into strategic content, especially around EAT. Lily Ray, who is also a DJ, by the way, kind of put it best in her search engine journal posts around structured data. She had said, kind of paraphrasing her words, improving EAT hinges on giving search engines as much info about the credibility, reputation, trustworthiness of those who are contributing. And all those elements are particularly important to mark up with schema whenever possible. And this is oftentimes fairly simple to do with the right resources. It's just a matter of doing it. Some of the common examples specific to content would be structured data around person, organization, news article, blog posting. Those are some of the obvious ones. If our content is a little bit more instructional, or has directions or specific steps. How to markup is fairly powerful there. And FAQs markup is another big one where if we have specific questions in our copy that we can address, we might want to mark that up with FAQ. And that can help us to occupy a little bit more real estate when those start to show up as rich snippets in the search results. And slightly more on the blog side of things, with blog roll pages using collection page schema can be a great way to wrap multiple different forms of schema all kind of in this same situation, where we might have videos, how-tos, FAQs that we might want to all mark up using that collection page schema type.
Yep. And at the Gray Company, I say that we're advocates for utilizing structured data, whether or not that is approved, quote unquote, by Google for use, or, have they explicitly stated that they're using that to update search results, whether through rich snippets or featured snippets or other means. If you have the resources to make this happen, it pays dividends to be forward thinking, to experiment with stuff, to volunteer that information, so that if and when Google actively experiments with putting stuff on, new things to show up on search results, you're already in a good position to be showing up and then to get an outsized proportion of that traffic. If you're chasing after other people who started to get featured snippets later after the fact, it's harder work to dethrone them to get that higher ranking. So to the extent, again, that you have those resources, this is something that we've seen a lot of success in, volunteering this information ahead of time. We want to talk about accessibility as a whole. It's such a huge portion of what it means to talk to users. You should be doing this in terms of improving your site's accessibility because it's the right thing to do. But there was a great point that Miracle brought up in her Women in Tech SEO Fest conversation, or her talk at London here in February, about exactly who has the money today and who has growing accessibility needs. So as a business, as a brand, you should be doing the right thing and you should be making your site more accessible. But if that argument is not flying with your executive team or bosses or whomever you're speaking to, also consider the money you're leaving on the table, because boomers got money and boomers are not going to spend it if they cannot access your website. So do you want the money or do you not want the money? Your decision. This is a tactic that we've seen working really well for ourselves, for video content, for our webinar that we run, Opinionated SEO Opinions, as well as taped webinars, much like this one, where we might have a deck with presentations. We really love producing transcripts that are functional, useful, referenceable, multi different assets, just because if you have an accessibility issue in terms of your site, you might not have it in terms of hearing, or vice versa. So you don't have to only do the thing that everyone does, which is, if you're lucky, you get the dynamically generated transcript that no human ever even bothers to read, and they stick it under the video and you call it a day. This is real functional content. You can and should organize it into headers, just like you would your normal content, to help people read it. You can add a table of contents. If you have a slide presentation, you can take pictures of those slides and you can include them in line. You could outline what the text is in addition to the alt text of what's showing on the slides, like this particular deck, which is very text heavy, right? Like you might be missing context in this conversation. I'm not reading you every single line, so just the transcript is not carrying the whole of the conversation here. So slide text, video transcript text, headers, images, all of these things can help mean that you have a really dynamic and interesting piece of content that people can consume in a variety of formats, because not everyone wants to watch your video, not everyone wants to listen to your podcast, and not everyone wants to read, this 3,000 word long article, which is apparently all we can write in my company. But they might like one of those things. So think about diversifying in terms of giving it to them in the way that they want it. And that opens the door for all sorts of different people of all sorts of different abilities.
Yeah, well put, Tori. And that takes us to diversifying media elements. So a little similar to, or kind of dovetails nicely on that last topic. And this is fairly straightforward, but it's a proven concept that works well, especially in competitive SEO environments where it really all, again, comes down to serving user intent and diversifying our content in ways that are going to be more serving and engaging for those users. It could be videos, screenshots, infographics, charts, utility tools like a calculator, whatever it's going to be to prop up our already awesome content in new and different ways. Kind of using my example here on my hobby blog in the triathlon space, I had a post that gets a lot of interest around people who want to know about the average finisher times for an Ironman. And that type of information might be kind of hard to articulate in a paragraph or a bullet list because it's kind of cumbersome. We're talking about professionals versus age groupers, male versus female. So I kind of used my subpar graphic design skills to whip up a little infographic that performs really well.
I couldn't make that, but
I may have gotten a little help, but yeah, it's a nice supplement to an already in-depth piece of content that's all about, triathlon distances and average times. So just sort of thinking outside the box on how you can elevate your content in visual ways and striking up a little bit more engagement in the process of doing that.
Yeah, and I'd actually call out the Pinterest link here. Pinterest is fantastic for driving huge volumes of traffic. If you think of Pinterest as a search engine and you include your keywords in your posts and you share your visually interesting assets, that is a hugely under-leveraged platform from our perspective.
100% agreed.
We also want to talk about meaningful template pages. These are landing pages, not necessarily long-form strategic content, but there's still obviously content components here. I see a lot of people doing these, and mostly what I want to say is if you're going to do it, take the time to do it right. There's too many people that want to automate everything, and all they want to do is scale, and they don't take the time to make sure that the actual piece of content that they're creating here is legitimately useful. And that's a missed opportunity. Fortunately, there's plenty of examples out there in the world of people that are doing it right. This is Airbnb and Canva, for example. Canva took poster templates, which might have, previously been a long form piece of content or been a landing page where, things are moving around, featuring this and features that, and they made it an e-commerce page. Airbnb's page has a great way to break down where you might be able to stay in a particular location according to, housing type or neighborhood, or all these different facets of ways that people really want to narrow in on how to choose a place to stay. So there's lots of good examples. Go seek them out. Absolutely explore doing them, but don't publish them until they're actually good and interesting and worthwhile. Oh, before we move on, I wanted to say there's more good examples. There's a link in one of these tabs to Flow SEO. There's even more specific examples of non-boring SEO content. So I definitely encourage you to go check those out.
Yeah, and that would be the first slide that starts this particular chapter around what's working today. So do check those out. And lastly, never stop exploring. Wherever you're at in your content strategy, you can sort of gradually take ownership of your niche by just continuously exploring, experimenting with new ideas, especially things that others aren't doing. We like to try to balance with an 80-20 rule concept around continuing to do what we're already doing 80% of the time, whereas that other 20%, let's try exploring entirely new ideas, even if they're a little far out. So some thought starters here, just what are some things that we haven't tried yet? What are things that others are not doing, particularly our direct competitors? And maybe how can we get a little less salesy or a little less SEO-y with our content, and maybe focus a little bit more on inspirational content or educational stuff, or sort of that top of funnel content that sort of fosters thought leadership naturally versus trying to force it. So really the sky is the limit here. So continue to experiment and explore with your content. And that's a wrap, folks. Thank you all for joining us. If you want to continue the conversation, you can hit us up on Twitter at gray.co or ClearScope.
Wow, that was so loaded with all of these very different ideas. I was like going through, taking a bunch of notes as I do. That'll go on, you know, the video transcript on the YouTube when we upload this. But it was so rich in just all of these different strategies. I was like thinking, oh wow, you know, with Tory's point on the multi-domain strategy, I'd love to kick off the Q&A. We see a lot of large media conglomerates like Condé Nast and you know, like Red Ventures have basically, you know, lots of very high authority websites that focus on specific verticals within the category of keywords or topics that they're pursuing. When would you actually want to pursue a multi-domain strategy for your business?
There's a lot of questions there, and I have laid them out on the post, so I encourage you to go read it. But some of the high level things, you know, how big are you as a brand? A lot of it has to do with your budget. Can you afford to maintain and market multiple different websites? Because you can't just put up a website and magically expect it to work. So if you're adding another website, you're literally doubling your efforts to some extent. Like, yes, there's some wins and things you can, you know, maybe there's tech stack things that you can reuse. There are some synergies there, but overall, you are fundamentally talking about a whole different brand. So if you are, I think it's PG&E something, they own both Loves and Pampers, right? Like, it does not make sense for the users. Those are entirely different brands. They are owned by the same corporate company. And when you walk into the diaper aisle, I have a 6-year-old, that's 90% of what you see there, and they look like totally different brands. And if you don't know that they're owned by the same corporate company, you're not going to know that they are the same thing. And that's not necessarily information the brand wants you to know and understand and conceptualize of. So, you know, a lot of those decisions are brand decisions and budget decisions. Some of it's SEO competitiveness, like and you mentioned verticals, Bernard, like how specialized can you get in terms of how Google sees your org as an entity with a specialization in X. It can be hard to break into a new vertical as a brand that's known for this versus starting a new site. So there's a lot of different factors you're weighing, but those are some of the high level ones that I like to discuss with clients.
Yeah, got it. Makes sense. Well, opening it up to everybody, we have 5 to start, and you definitely should keep them coming. Tyler and Tory here are here to just show you how to elevate content even further. First question that we have from Cindy. She asks, how can we do more with jump links as an SEO strategy? Jump links are commonly those, you know, like table of contents that you see in the articles in the above the fold experience. We have a table of contents on Traveling Mom, which is her website, but I never thought of it as more than user experience. So questions or thoughts about jump links and doing more with those?
I can jump in here, and Tyler, you are welcome to contribute as well. So one of the most straightforward things is making sure you're formatting those correctly. So we're on a particular web platform that I had to experiment with a lot to make sure that those were actually structured correct so that I could get the markup to show in search. So you can't say put your page path and then the hash and then the jump link. That won't actually, that's not structured right. You have to start it at the hash in terms of where your table of content links to the bottom page. So that's one thing I was getting wrong early on. Another thing is to make sure that your headers are actually wrapped in what that header is for the anchor and the thing you're titling. So one mistake that I was making early on we used Webflow, and we had to have a custom code block to add the anchor where it should be. And then we were utilizing the headers separately underneath. So it needs to actually wrap around the header. I can try and remember to send you a link, but there are guides out there for like structurally the right way to do it in order to get that rich markup to show in its search. So that's the most straightforward thing directly for SEO. In terms of your other marketing channels, I think about where would those anchors be useful in other channel contexts. So you're probably thinking about it in UX in terms of your post and where people want to jump, but you could also think about it in terms of client questions you get. Like sometimes you broaden a topic and then this is the one specific thing that clients might, have a question about. So maybe I make an anchor for that use case so I can send someone a direct link to the direct thing. Those are some of my answers. Tyler, how else do you like to?
Yeah, I would even think outside of just table of contents too sometimes, even looking at links that can be contextual in the paragraph itself. If you want to direct a user to a certain point that's within that article, that maybe you don't want to have that in the table of contents, but it's more of an internal link that will take them either higher or lower on the page, depending on where it's placed. That can help serve usability. I'll even look at it through sort of the planning stages too, and seeing like, okay, we want to cover all these specific topics, what's going to resonate the most with our audience. Maybe even including a little bit of keyword relevance there too, especially when we're considering the possibility of those links showing up in the search results. Sometimes that can really help it pop a little bit more. So you can even use some of that more conventional SEO thinking of like, for instance, if we're talking about bikes, maybe we want to have more topical internal jump links around gravel bikes, road bikes, triathlon bikes, really just kind of understanding the nature of your content, who are the types of people who are coming to that content, and how we can kind of bridge that gap with strategies like using jump links.
Yeah, totally. I feel like there's a lot of insight there with correct implementation. And also I love the idea, Tyler, of servicing the most relevant intents that you're aware of, given that like broader topic. If you're doing more of a topic cluster or pillar page, it'll be more centered around the Google autocomplete suggestions surrounding, bikes, like road, mountain, that sort of thing. Whereas if you're already kind of deeper in, it's more about surfacing the real intent that I think the user is there for, at least highly like probably there for, and then putting those as like, oh, look, we talk about that within our page, I think will really drive up the user's ability to find what they need on your page. And I think that's like a real benefit of like the jump link itself. Cool. A lot of questions. So Amari asks, how many times a week should we publish on our blog? And SEO is oftentimes on a blog, but does it also matter to the general content of a website? So we'll start with those two.
My very opinionated opinion there is that it depends. And I'd say specifically, it depends on how quickly can you produce something that is unique and valuable. And that's all that matters. There's not a formula. There's not a specific number. I mean, on the Grey Company, we publish maybe twice a month, and we have an outsized proportion of traffic because we spend the time to make sure we get those pieces right. Certainly, if you can get quality and quantity, that's going to be more helpful, but focus on quality first and then focus on scale.
Yeah, and I would wholeheartedly agree with that. There really is no magic number. I suppose you probably don't want to be waiting months to keep your blog fresh, but yeah, ultimately it just depends on who you're speaking to and what sort of caliber of content that you're putting out there.
Yep. You can also look to your competitors to see how often they're putting things out as a benchmark of where you might want to scale to over time as you figure out the quality question. But if you're producing content that's 5x their quality, then I don't think you need to keep up with their scale to get the same or better results.
Awesome. All right. Amari also asks, how do we know if our SEO strategy is working? What are some of the preliminary, right? Assuming a website is getting started from scratch, and they're starting to produce content. How do you know what are the leading signals that your SEO content is starting to pay dividends?
This is a great question, and something we've actually built our reporting internally around making sure we can communicate to clients, because SEO can be a long-term funnel in terms of how, when you're actually producing revenue from the results that you are moving. So our reporting circles around, high level metrics, if you can get brand information or, social media sort of tools to help you monitor brand awareness and share of voice and all those kinds of things. Those are awesome to have if you can afford them. If you can't, I think even just starting with Google Search Console and looking at impressions, and over time, as those things grow, looking at your keyword footprint, how is that growing over time, and making sure those are trending up and to the right, generally speaking, over time. Obviously, there'll be dips and ebbs and flows, but overall, if we're moving in the right direction. I think those are the major ones, but then also looking at, your site sessions and users and how that's growing over time. And then also in terms of the funnel, whatever your goal is for your site. Are you just looking to move traffic? Then that might be enough because you're a media site, but then it might be more engagement metrics around how many pages did you view or what may have you. But if you're in e-commerce, then it's obviously sales and average order value and those sorts of conversions. It might be lead generation, which is a lot of the sites that we work on. So again, looking at the full funnel and making sure that everything starts up and to the right, and that it starts to flow over time down as you fill up your funnel.
Yeah, I might even add too, looking specifically at engagement, especially if it's a new site. If you're talking about a new campaign or a new website, new content strategy, you're sort of fresh. Maybe you're not getting a ton of traffic yet, but average session duration is 2 to 3 minutes on average. That's exciting. I think that speaks volumes to the quality of your content, and that's the kind of stuff that will long term help move the needle versus more conventional metrics like rankings and things like that. So
yeah. Social shares, I think, are also an early indicator if you have a good distribution strategy. Are you getting links? Are people responding to it? Are people commenting? Do people care and take the time to read and take action? Those are your earliest signs of success for the piece itself, not necessarily for the SEO, but that your content resonates and is meaningful to your user.
Yeah, I love it. I remember I came up with what I thought was a very novel and interesting way to figure out resonance early on, because a lot of people, right, just think so hard about creating the content and then not so hard about distributing it. Whereas, right, some would argue 50% creation, 50% distribution, something like that. So what I did, this is replicable for all of you that are getting started, is like I would source writers on Upwork or Elance, like this is back in the day. And basically, I would tell them that they would come up with the topic and write the piece of content. And what I would do is I would just post a piece of content on our blog or resource center and post it to the subreddit that would be applicable to. So you can imagine for SEO, there's r/SEO or big SEO. And I was like, okay, well, we'll pay you to do repetitive work if your post can get above like 30 upvotes or whatever was like just above average on the subreddit. And we just churned through like so many different writers, and we got like some rock star writers that just understood like what specifically the community wanted to read. And those would be like so heavily upvoted. And I was like, oh, this is so great, because now I know, okay, like you know how to write interesting stuff and you don't. And we just like parsed out a bunch of like writers that didn't work out. So that was like another way that we went around doing that. A couple more questions. So Brenda has a clarifying question. She says, what are you referring to as a template page? I would say that it is more of a category or archive page. Maybe I'm not understanding the terminology.
I specifically mean any, a category page is arguably a templatized page, but it's basically a page you specifically design to replicate and switch out kind of your keyword target. So in the e-commerce world, that is a category page. But if you're Airbnb, there was really no layout and page or template for where to stay in Denver, where to stay in Norway, where to stay in, list your city location, whatever. There is no equivalent to that. So they had to create a page and think through the intuitive user experience. In Canva's example, they're creating these different versions of these template pages. So there's templates for posters and templates for lost dogs. There's templates for, invitations and all these different things. They've structured it in an e-commerce layout, but, sometimes those are more of a traditional, almost like a pay-per-click landing page looking thing with, the form to sign up to get that asset with some content selling why you'd want to do that. So really it's anything where you have a pattern of keywords and you can take these sets of keywords and have the same layout of a page and plug and plop different keywords or intents for your keywords and then replicate that effort over and over again.
Awesome. All right. We have at least one last question from Irene. This one's going to be pretty complicated. So let's boil it down. How do you avoid keyword cannibalization between a brand's central hub, their blog or resource center, and its transactional landing pages? I run a lot of upper funnel content, which doesn't compete with our landing pages on the main site, but the mid-funnel content can do so. For example, a blog post on how to send money to X country. We want our transactional pages to rank for this, but also on the blog, we can include richer, longer form content and a better reader experience. And those pages on our blog oftentimes conflict and rank better than the actual transactional landing pages that we've created. How then do you navigate this?
Yeah, I think you're running up against some natural tension between what the business wants and what value they want to derive from the user and what the user is seeking. I would honestly argue how to send money to X country. I think it's possible to do that in more of a transactional page, but it's going to be a bit of a blend where you're educating the user about the need that they have. In order to do that. So it's going to be also an educational resource because if you're not meeting their need in the first place, they're going to bounce. So I think a pure transactional page that only just helps you do that, frankly, you're going to struggle to rank because you're fighting against the user need. That doesn't mean you can't get creative. That doesn't mean you can't get conversions from those pages because some users are ready to move now. But yeah, I think it's a balance and really understanding user intent as it aligns to what people are looking for, and then answering that and then balancing the business, revenue driving needs with that so that everybody wins instead of it being a fight.
Follow-up to this is that her blog is on a subdomain. Does that make a big difference here?
Probably. Is the very honest yes. Subdomains for strategic content are, oh my goodness, such a big conversation. We have a whole, almost I think a dedicated episode on opinionated SEO opinions about subdomains. So check that out. But yeah, that probably matters. You're running two whole different websites and you're ranking two whole different websites. So of course it's going to be harder.
Well, there you have it. All right, we covered a lot in today's call, right? EAT, extra media, hidden intent, buried intent, keyword mapping, all this good stuff. What would be, in both of your opinions, the most important things that you should take into consideration or that you've done that are as widely applicable to all kinds of pages, clientele that you've worked with? So, right, I know everybody will say, yes, eat is more important for your money, your life, or this multimedia is more important for how-to or instructional content because it's going to do a better job. But on average, based on everything that you've seen and that you've done, what are not as much it depends and more like, okay, I think you got to have this regardless of what kind of industry, business model, or target persona you're looking to like rank for or keyword, that kind of stuff.
Tyler, you want to do this one first?
Sure. Yeah, I hope I'm not taking your answer, but it ultimately all circles back to the value you're providing with your content. You can talk about all the little granular things to help elevate the content, and we can still use search data and keywords to understand what topics people are interested in and what those problems are and what those questions are. And that can help instruct our content, but really the strategic component is how we're bringing that content to the table and what kind of value we're bringing and what type of content that looks like, if it is more video based or if it is long form blog posts. What really speaks volumes is the quality of that content and how well it resonates with our target audience. At the end of the day, that's what's going to move the needle, or that's what's going to be destined for failure if you're not doing that properly. So that's kind of my spiel on the overarching umbrella behind what really matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, you totally stole my point, but just to elaborate on that, I completely agree. I mean, a lot of these things that we're talking about are tactical executions, not why it's going to matter. And for me, everything comes back to the why, and it comes back to, providing value, but also doing that in a uniquely valuable way. So I don't think there's anything more critical in today's ecosystem than articulating your point of view, what you're good at, what is special about you, and you being a brand in this scenario, and how and how you're providing value. So those things are uniquely intertwined, but you can't provide value that's going to stand out as a part of your brand if you don't really hone in on what you're doing that is special and different. So it does bring SEO back to a lot of those core branding needs, which I think is a little uncomfortable for a lot of SEOs, but I think it's a muscle that we need to start to stretch more and more because it is so critical. It's about the brand, and it's about the brand positioning. Go big on something SEO wise that is meaningful to your brand. And you don't have to be perfect at everything, but pick and choose where you can stand out and be valuable.
I love it. I love it. What I'm gathering from this is SEO is becoming a lot less science and a lot more art. So kind of be free to go and experiment with things that you may not have necessarily pegged as SEO before, but are just cool content endeavors that really highlight and speak to your brand values and bring thought leadership and unique perspectives to the table. And I would say the other thing that I'm hearing from this is that, yeah, it does obviously depend, but really think about, right, like the user experience and asking yourself, if you were looking for that particular query and you landed on your own page, would you actually be satisfied and find what you're looking for? And that ultimately is providing value and answering the why. And I think that we're entering an era, you had a slide with the animals, the era of infinite content, and the internet is honestly a landfill of a bunch of junk content. And so really actually asking yourself that question, whether or not somebody lands on the page, if you landed on your own page, if you would find what you needed, is really not like so high of a bar, but it is something that I think a lot of people don't do, that if you did, well, your content will just likely do a lot better.
Yep. Tyler and I jokingly call this pixie dust. This is
Pixie
like,
dust.
you need it to be solid, you need it to be well-rounded, you need it to be well thought out and comprehensive, but more than anything, what you need is a little something special and different that
Yeah.
makes it yours.
Yeah, the secret sauce. Well, if you're looking for some of the best content and SEO strategists out there, definitely hit up Tyler and Tory. They really know their stuff, and I can't recommend them more. And thanks everyone for tuning in, and hope you learned a lot. Take care.
Thanks so much for having us, Bernard. It's been really
Thanks.
lovely. Best
Yes.
of luck in everything. We will be excited to watch ClearScope's journey as they explore ever new
Yes.
ways in which we can use you.
Yes, we have some cool stuff that we're working on that will tell everybody more of when the time comes. And then I'll follow up with y'all shortly after this call.
Thanks so much.
Cool. Take care.
Thank you.